Hello, ELL students. This is Mr. Neal. This is your video for week 3, lesson 1, which can be found on my website and can be found in the email that is shared out to you. So today we're going to be starting a short story called Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes. And to help get you started, I want to give you some background information about this short story and about the author. Then I will read through the story with some explanation, just like I would have done if I were reading this aloud to you in class. You have 2 options when you're reading today. Option number 1, you can read it by yourself, and you will find the story linked where it says paper copy of Thank You, Ma'am on my website under week 3. Or you can read along on the screen as I read it out loud. So I'm going to start off by showing you information about the story and about Langston Hughes. So Langston Hughes was an author who lived in the early 1900s and died around 1967. So he was alive during the majority of the civil rights movement in the United States, but died before it formally ended. And he lived most of his life in New York City. As you can see from the picture on the right, he is an African-American man. And most of his stories and his poetry are about African-Americans during this time. So in New York City, there is a place called Harlem. Harlem, even though it's not said in the story, we can assume that the story takes place in Harlem because most of Langston Hughes' stories do. And this is an area in New York City, just a small part, that is where most of the African-American or Black people were living during this time. It was a predominantly African-American neighborhood. As you can see, a lot like other big cities, we have these tall buildings. They're not spread out. Things are very close, but they're built up tall to make room for people. And a lot of people would go out and participate in their culture in this time. Lots of music, lots of dancing, lots of going out at nights in order to celebrate and to live in this culture. If you're interested in learning more about the music or the culture or the stories of this time, just send me an email. So I'm going to start off by reading to you the story of Thank You, Ma'am. It's important for you to remember that ma'am is a word that we might use to refer to a woman respectfully, and it's typically a woman that's older than you. It may not be used as much anymore, but it is a common word that people would understand in the United States. So I'm going to start off by sharing our story, and I'm going to read it aloud. Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes. She was a large woman with a large purse that had everything in it but hammer and nails. It had a long strap that she carried it across her shoulder. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and she was walking alone when a boy ran up behind her and tried to snatch her purse. If you hear and it says like someone trying to snatch something, that means they're trying to steal it. The strap broke with the single tug the boy gave it from behind. But the boy's weight and the weight of the purse combined caused him to lose his balance. So instead of taking off full blast or running at great speed, as he had hoped, the boy fell on his back on the sidewalk and his legs flew up. The large woman simply turned around and kicked him right square in his blue jean sitter. We're talking about the part of the pants or of the blue jeans where you would sit. That's your butt. So she kicked him right in the butt. Then she reached down, picked the boy up by his shirt front, and shook him until his teeth rattled. In the picture, we can see the long strapped purse. And she just grabbed him by the front of his shirt and shook him after she kicked him. After that, the woman said, pick up my checkbook. Whoa, pick up my pocketbook or wallet, boy, and give it here. She still held him. but she bent down enough to permit him to bend and pick up her purse. Then she said, "Now, ain't you ashamed of yourself?" Firmly gripped by his shirt front, the boy said, "Yes'm." Now, if you see "yes'm" in a story, that's going to mean yes, ma'am. "No'm" is going to mean no, ma'am. So she says, "Don't you feel bad for what you did? Ain't you ashamed of yourself?" And he's like, "Oh, yes'm, yes, ma'am." The woman said, "Well, what did you want to do it for?" The boy said, I didn't aim to." She said, "You a lie," or "You're a liar." By that time, 2 or 3 people passed, stopped, turned to look, and some stood watching. "If I turn you loose, will you run?" asked the woman. "Yes'm," said the boy. "Well, then I won't turn you loose," said the woman. She did not release him. I'm very sorry, lady. I'm very sorry," whispered the boy. "Mm-hmm, and your face is dirty. I got a great mind to wash your face for you. Ain't you got nobody at home to tell you to wash your face?" "No," said the boy. "Well, then it will get washed this evening," said the large woman, starting up the street, dragging the frightened boy behind her. So pause right there a moment. So students, this young boy is saying that he doesn't have anyone at home to tell him to wash his face. So that might get me thinking that his parents may not be around very much, or that they're not there at all. He looked as if he were 14 or 15, skinny and weak, in tennis shoes and blue jeans. The woman said, "You ought to be my son. I would teach you right from wrong. Least I can do now is to wash your face. Are you hungry?" "No," said the boy, the being dragged boy. "I just want you to turn me loose." "Was I bothering you when I turned that corner?" asked the woman. "No, but you put yourself in contact with me," said the woman. "If you think that contact is not going to last a while, you got another thought coming. When I get through with you, sir, you are going to remember Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. That is her full name." Sweat popped out on the boy's face and he began to struggle. Mrs. Jones stopped, jerked him around in front of her, grabbed him around his neck, and continued dragging him up the street. When she got to her door, she dragged the boy inside, down a hall, and into a large kitchen at the rear of the house. She switched on the light and left the door open. The boy could hear other people laughing and talking in the large house. Some of their doors were open too, so he knew he and the woman were not alone. The woman still had him by the neck in the middle of her room. So students, when we have this home that has a lot of people inside of it, it's possible that this is what is called a tenement house. So this picture right here shows a picture of a tenement, which is an apartment building that has very small rooms, and the rooms are very close to each other. During this time, there were a lot of tenements, especially in New York City, and typically people who were poor or did not have a lot of money lived in tenement halls. So this gets me thinking. That might tell me some information about Mrs. Jones that I did not know before. She said, "What is your name?" "Roger," answered the boy. "Then, Roger, you go to that sink and you wash your face," said the woman, turning him loose at last. Roger looked at the door, then looked at the woman, looked at the door, and went to the sink. "Let the water run until it gets warm," she said. "Here's a clean towel." "You gonna take me to jail?" asked the boy, bending over the sink. "Not with that face, I wouldn't take you nowhere," said the woman. "Here I am trying to get home to cook me a bite to eat, and you snatch my pocketbook. Maybe you ain't been to your supper either, late as it be. Have you?" There's nobody home at my house," said the boy. "Well, then we'll eat," said the woman. "I believe you're hungry, or been hungry, to try to snatch my pocketbook." So students, she's saying, well, I'm going to feed you. You must have been hungry if you were trying to steal money from my pocketbook. I wanted a pair of blue suede shoes, said the boy. Students, suede is a type of material that might be used to create something like shoes. It's got like a soft feel to it. This picture to the right is an example of blue suede shoes. So they are a little bit more expensive than your regular shoe because of the materials. And so these might be a little bit more expensive. So the boy was trying to steal money from her to buy shoes. Well, you didn't have to snatch my pocketbook to get some suede shoes, said Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. You could have asked me. Ma'am? The water dripping from his face, the boy looked at her. There was a long pause, a very long pause. After he had dried his face and not knowing what else to do, dried it again, the boy turned around, wondering what next. The door was open. He could make a dash or a run for it down the hall. He could run, 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 run. The woman was sitting on the daybed. After a while, she said, I was young once, and I wanted things I couldn't get. There was another long pause. The boy's mouth opened. Then he frowned, but not knowing he frowned. The woman said, You thought I was going to say it, but didn't you? You thought I was going to say it, but I didn't have to snatch people's pocketbooks. Well, I wasn't going to say that. Pause. Silence. I've done things too which I would not tell you, son. Neither tell God if you didn't already know. So you sit down while I fix us something to eat. You might run that comb through your hair so you'll look a little presentable. So students, it seems like Mrs. Jones has done some things in the past that are also questionable. She doesn't say, I stole from people, but she says, I've done things that I would not tell you. So she must have done something in the past. In another corner of the room, behind a screen, was a gas plate and an icebox. A gas plate is like a small stove, and an icebox is a refrigerator. Mrs. Jones got up and went behind the screen. The woman did not watch the boy to see if he was going to run now, nor did she watch her purse, which she had left behind her on the bed. But the boy took care to sit on the far side of the room where he thought she could easily see him out of the corner of her eye if she wanted to. He did not trust the woman not to trust him, and he did not want to be mistrusted now. Do you need somebody to go to the store? Asked the boy. Maybe to get some milk or something? Don't believe I do, said the woman. Unless you just want sweet milk yourself. I was going to make cocoa out of this canned milk I got here. That will be fine, said the boy. She heated some lima beans and ham she had in the icebox, made the cocoa, and set the table. The woman did not ask the boy anything about where he lived, or his folks meaning parents, or anything else that would embarrass him. Instead, as they ate, she told him about her job in a hotel beauty shop that stayed open late, what the work was like, and how all kinds of women came in and out, blondes, redheads, and Spanish. Then she cut him a half of her cake. So students, it seems like Mrs. Jones is being really polite, not asking him questions about his life, and is not trying to embarrass him. Eat some more, son, she said. When they were finished eating, she got up and said, Now here, take this $10 and buy yourself some blue suede shoes. And next time, do not make the mistake of latching onto my pocketbook nor nobody else's, because shoes bought by devilish like will burn your feet. I gotta go get my rest now, but I wish you would behave yourself, son, from here on in. Students, let's stop for a second and let's look at what she's saying here. Specifically in this line that I'm highlighting right here. So she's giving him $10, which right now, $10 is not a lot of money, but during this time, $10 would have been quite a bit of money. And she said, here's the money, but do not make the mistake of latching onto my pocketbook nor nobody else's. She's like, here's the money, but don't you ever try to steal from me or someone else again. Because shoes bought by devilish like will burn your feet. So students, I see in this word devilish, this may not be a word that we know, but inside of this word, I see the word devil. The word devil is something that is very evil that tries to make people do evil or bad things. So if something is devilish, that means that it's evil or bad. So she's saying, because shoes bought by devilish likes will burn your feet. So things that are bought or got through bad or evil ways, like stealing, will burn your feet. Well, I know if I get burnt, I know that it hurts, and that's not a good thing. So she's saying if you try to do something bad and use bad money to buy something, it's going to end up hurting you. She led him down the hall to the front door and opened it. Good night. Behave yourself, boy, she said, looking out into the street. The boy wanted to say something else other than, thank you, ma'am, to Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, but he couldn't do so as he turned at the empty stoop and looked back at the large woman in the door. He barely managed to say thank you before she shut the door, and he never saw her again. Students, when we talk about a stoop, this part of the walkway up the stairs going up into a building, that's called a stoop. And that's the end of the story. So, students, this story featuring Mrs. Jones and Roger is our focus for this week. So, now that you have a better idea of this story, what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you answer the Flipgrid question for this week. And I will put that up on the screen right now. Our Flipgrid question for this week is, after reading Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes, answer this question and explain why you think that way. Do you think that Mrs. Jones did the right thing by feeding Roger and giving him money? Why or why not? Remember, Roger tried to steal from her, and rather than taking him to the police, she took him home, fed him, and gave him money. Do you think that was the right thing to do? Tell me why or why not. Remember, after you complete this lesson, go do the Flipgrid assignment. Then you can move on to lesson number 2. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me during our Zoom meetings, during my office hours on Wednesday morning at 10 to noon, or Friday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. You got this.